Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Dumim in Israel. It is not unusual that people see mysterious repetitive cycles in the course of their lives. They imagine that something they are going through currently has somehow happened already in the past. They may perceive that they are reliving some event like a personal version of the movie Groundhog's Day. People, places, or things may seem to recur in their lives in disturbing patterns, as if they are somehow bound by fate to them in some strange manner from which they can never be extricated. There is no explanation for this phenomenon. It may be purely imaginary, but it may also be as real as memory. This bizarre thing, whether real or otherwise, is not restricted to individuals. It happens also to groups. A family or a group of friends may sense that collective experiences have a certain cyclical or repetitive nature, such that the past is constantly revisiting them in the present. They may even decide the course of their future based on such fatalistic beliefs. Larger groups, such as an entire society, even a nation, may write into their own history the apparent fact that certain things seem to happen to them again and again, like a theme written in some book. Some of these observations are not as irrational as they might appear at first glance. Social unrest, economic patterns of prosperity or poverty, wars or natural disasters can be as predictable and as expected as the return of a comet. When it comes to religious groups, the cyclical nature of things is almost the defining feature of their existence. Religions thrive on seeing significance in what others may have seen as chance events and attributing to them divine intervention or some act of fate that is forever intertwined with their collective experience. This is part and parcel of the religious experience. Life is not to be seen as a haphazard series of events with no meaning or goal, but as a purposeful, planned, and supervised script written out for them to play their part within and to fulfill their destiny. If that script involves repeating the past in some way, even over and over again, so be it. On the contrary, it allows the believers the wherewithal to get it right this time around. The Jews, of course, are no exception to this. In fact, they may be at the top of the list of those who tend to see these sorts of things in their collective history. The reliving of the Exodus from Egypt is the classic example of this, but there are several others from either biblical or post-biblical times that seem to recur at sporadic or regular intervals in Jewish history. Rather than shrink from succumbing to such possibly superstitious thoughts, Jews tend to see them as proof of their unique destiny in the world and as reminders of the task which they must somehow fulfill. It may be seen as a curse or a blessing, but it is certainly seen as something. This week's Parsha is called Naso. That small word is the heading for the longest Parsha in the Torah, which includes several different topics that have no apparent connection. We are going to skip most of that and focus on one particular section, the so-called Nazirite vow. This vow is for one who wishes to attain a certain level of the biblical standards of holiness by abstaining from all intoxicating drinks, not grooming his or her hair, and avoiding contact with corpses. While these may not seem to be the royal road to holiness by today's standards, this was the biblical formula for achieving such a lofty goal. It is admittedly difficult to relate to much of this, but it may have served some essential purpose in biblical times. Surprisingly, or perhaps expectedly, we find only one unambiguous example of such a vow in the entire Bible. This is the case of the famous or infamous Samson. His vow was not his own personal choice. It was accepted by his mother before he was even conceived. In fact, his mother was not really given the choice to make this vow. It was imposed upon her in the course of visitations by an angelic being who informed her that her future son was to begin the salvation of the Israelites from the hands of their perpetual enemies, the Philistines. The Nazirite vow demanded of her and her son seems to have been slightly different from that described in the Torah. The restriction on intoxicating drinks was placed upon her, while that of hair cutting was to be upon her son. There is no mention of avoiding contact with corpses, but she was told to not consume anything impure. Thus, the vow seems to have been divided up between her and her son for reasons that are left unclear. In the course of this mysterious visitation to her, she brings her husband into the mix, who at first was unaware of anything strange happening to his wife. When he witnesses the angel speaking to his wife, he asks it to repeat the instructions as to what to do with their future son. The angel departs amidst an offering made to God, and they both realize the truly miraculous nature of what has occurred. Neither of them ever see this angel again. The child is then born, named Samson, and is blessed in some way by God. He spent his entire life in the region of southern Israel near the border with the land of the Philistines. His life was eventful to the point of recklessness. His story is one of the longest individual stories in the book of Judges, so he is clearly considered to be a person of significance. His life takes place over a decades-long period of Philistine dominance over Israel. It included a couple of romantic encounters with Philistine women, which caused his fate to be completely intertwined with that of the Israelites and the Philistines. The first, who goes nameless, becomes his wife over the initial objections of his parents. It is apparent that his interest in her was to seek a way to gain some revenge on the Philistines. In the course of a strange series of events involving his killing of a lion and finding its carcass filled with honey, and a bet with some Philistines involving a riddle posed during the wedding feast to which his wife coaxed the answer from him, he kills them all. Following this, his father-in-law refuses to allow him contact with his wife. In an act of revenge against this, he lights a string of fires to burn a good deal of the Philistine harvest. When his own fellow Israelites attempt to tie him up to hand him over to the Philistines, he breaks his bonds and manages to kill 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. As if this wasn't enough for his violent career, he then meets another woman named Delilah, whom he falls in love with. This time, it is the Philistines who plot to use her to get to their eternal enemy. They tell her to somehow pry the secret of his strength from him so that they can defeat him once and for all. In the course of another series of intrigues in which she repeatedly ties him up to get him to reveal his secret, she finally succeeds through the tried and true method of nagging. He tells her that the source of his strength lies in the fact that he never cuts his hair, the single demand imposed upon him by the Nazirite vow of his mother. She then cuts off his hair when he is asleep, and the Philistines capture him, gouge out his eyes, and bring him to a prison in Gaza. Samson's wild life ends while being put on display in a Philistine building during a celebration over his capture. His strength returns to him after he prays for vengeance against his enemies, and he brings down the building upon himself and the thousands of Philistines present in the building and on the roof. So ends this strife-filled period of biblical history, inspired for the most part by the acts of one individual. This was not the end of the overall war with the Philistines, which would only reach its conclusion under the united monarchy under King David. It is not easy to read this story with an altogether clear conscience. Samson does not strike anyone as the paragon of biblical righteousness. He was a warrior. Of that, there is no doubt. His fraternizing with Philistine women, for whatever purpose, hardly qualifies as the preferred method of biblical dedication to the Israelite cause. Consequently, he has forever been seen in a mixed light, as the classic biblical hero on the one hand, but also as an example of one who makes his own rules and answers to none but himself. It is difficult to really know what to make of him, other than to reckon that in the end, his life was a success, at least by biblical standards. It is difficult to read this story and not be struck by the uncanny timing of the public reading of it as this week's Haftorah, which follows the weekly Torah reading in the synagogue, and the events that are taking place in Israel today. The attention of much of the world, and certainly all of the Middle East, has been riveted on the mini war going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians. While a good deal of the events have centered on riots and local battles between Jews and Arabs within towns in Israel, where the two groups live close to one another, the bulk of the actual war has taken place in events centering around the Gaza Strip. As of the recording of this podcast, there is no ceasefire and no clear path to ending the conflict. The rockets are still falling from Gaza, and the retaliation from Israel to knock out the military capabilities of Hamas and others in the Gaza Strip continues. While ceasefire possibilities are in the air, nobody knows at this point how exactly things will play out and what it means for the future. The name Palestine, of course, ultimately comes from the word Philistine. Gaza is the same place that it was 3,000 years ago in the time of Samson. The war goes on almost like it was picked up from Samson's individual battles and left off to be inherited by both his and their heirs in the 21st century. Do these things never end? What does this mean that we can read events from the Bible and feel as though they foreshadow events in our own lives today? Nobody really knows what to make of all this, perhaps because we're living in the midst of it and cannot see the entire picture as it plays out in time and politics. We are living through current history, and yet we cannot escape the feeling that we are reliving something out of the past that never was allowed to vanish. It is like a recurring dream or nightmare, which we must re-experience for reasons that reach beyond the scope of our vision. Perhaps there is something to that feeling that we are reliving events in either our individual or collective lives. Perhaps there is some reason for all this that goes beyond some omen-like premonition and enters the realm of genuine reality, however mysterious it may seem to us. Perhaps it is to teach us something essential for our own situation. Perhaps it is to teach the world something for its overall purpose. We do not know, but we are free to suspect and to make of it what we may. Maybe life is more than a series of random events or wild guesses as to what course to take. Maybe it is planned out in some way, and we have to figure out its patterns and messages. Shabbat Shalom.